On a cloud-clear June morning in London, an 18-year-old smiles for a quick Tower Bridge pic with her dad. Nothing ominous. That night, a photographer zooms in and freezes. A sun-bleached missing flyer taped to the bin behind her. Its toddler's face a mirror of the girl in the foreground, 15 years too soon. By morning, the photo is evidence. A mother half a world away wakes to hope, and the dad is suddenly in a hurry to leave the city. Tell us where you're watching from, and hit subscribe. Now let's rewind to the moment before a perfect snapshot becomes a manhunt. It was one of those rare London mornings, blue as glass and warm enough to feel like a promise. The air, usually tinged with bus metal and damp stone, tasted clean, almost sweet. Elara felt it on her skin, a gentle warmth that made everything seem possible. This was her 18th birthday trip, a grand tour with her father, Richard, and London was the opening scene of a perfect movie. She stood on the south bank of the Thames, back to the iconic silhouette of Tower Bridge, the sun catching the auburn in her long brown hair. She closed her eyes and listened. Gulls, the low rumble over the bridge, a dozen languages weaving around her. Ready, sweetie? Richard's voice warm, familiar, the bedrock of her life. He lifted his phone. One for the album. Elara laughed, striking a pose, one hand shading her eyes toward a bright future. The moment felt infinite, a snapshot of a girl on the cusp of everything, loved and secure. A few yards away, Anya Petrova adjusted the lens on her camera. She wasn't interested in the posed family portraits. She was a street photographer, a hunter of candid moments, of the unscripted poetry of urban life. She saw the American girl, bathed in that glorious morning light, and framed the shot. It wasn't just the girl, it was the entire composition. The ancient stones of the bridge, the modern gleam of the shard in the distance, and this vibrant young woman, a study in joyful nonchalance. The man with her, presumably her father, was just outside Anya's frame. She wanted the girl alone, a symbol of youth against the backdrop of history. She pressed the shutter. Click, a perfect capture. The light, the expression, the sweep of her hair in the breeze. Anya smiled to herself, knowing she had something special. She took a few more shots as the girl and her father walked away, their laughter echoing faintly, before she moved on, searching for the next story, hidden in the city's flow. That evening, back in her small flat in Camden, Anya uploaded the day's photos. She brewed a cup of tea, the steam fogging the window that overlooked the perpetually damp street below. As she scrolled through the images, she stopped at the one of the American girl. It was even better than she'd remembered. The focus was sharp, the colors vibrant. It had a certain energy, a feeling of hope. She decided to post it to her professional Instagram account, a curated gallery of her London captures. She wrote a simple caption, "An American Dreamer at Tower Bridge. London, 2024. She was about to hit share when she decided to zoom in, to check the sharpness on the girl's face one last time. Her eyes were crisp, her smile genuine. Then Anya's gaze drifted past her to the right of the frame. There was a large, gray public waste bin. Taped to its side, slightly peeling at the corners, was a piece of paper. A flyer. It was weathered, stained by rain and time, but the image on it was still visible. Anya zoomed in further, her browser pixelating the image slightly before it resolved. Her breath caught in her throat. It was a child's face. A little girl, no older than 3 or 4, with wide, serious eyes and the same cascade of auburn-tinted brown hair as the girl in the photograph. The shape of her face, the curve of her brow, the distinct Cupid's bow of her upper lip, it was identical. Uncannily so. Above the picture, bold, faded letters spelled out a single devastating word. Missing. Below it, a name. Lily Mae Thompson. And a date. 15 years ago. Anya felt a cold dread snake its way up her spine. It had to be a coincidence. A trick of the light, a simple case of doppelgangers born a generation apart. But the resemblance was too profound to dismiss. It was more than a likeness. It was a ghost print, a perfect echo across time. She looked from the smiling 18-year-old in the foreground to the lost 3-year-old in the background. Two faces, one life. The caption she'd written, "An American Dreamer," suddenly felt chillingly ironic. She hesitated, her finger hovering over the share button. Sharing this felt wrong, intrusive, dangerous, but not sharing it felt worse. It felt like complicity. Taking a deep breath, she added a second line to her caption, a question aimed at the digital void. Has anyone else ever noticed the flyers for Lily Mae Thompson? The resemblance to this girl I photographed today is haunting. Then she pressed share. The image flew out into the world, a digital message in a bottle, carrying a question that would soon shatter a carefully constructed reality and drag a terrible secret out of the shadows and into the harsh, unforgiving light. The post exploded. It started slowly, a trickle of comments from Anya's usual followers. Wow, that's creepy. Incredible resemblance. But the algorithm, that unseen god of the modern age, saw the engagement, the velocity of the shares, and began to feed the fire. Within hours, it had been picked up by amateur sleuths, by true crime forums, by people who remembered the case of the little girl who vanished from a London park 15 years ago. The comments morphed from casual observation to frantic speculation. That's her. That has to be her. Someone find this girl. The photograph was dissected, analyzed, and cross-referenced. Old news reports about Lily Mae Thompson were unearthed and linked in the comments. Pictures of her grieving parents, Lena and David, were posted side by side with Anya's photo. The story of their unwavering search, their refusal to give up hope, was retold in 100 different threads. They had never stopped looking. Every year, on the anniversary of her disappearance, they returned to London and put up new flyers, replacing the old, weathered ones, a ritual of hope against despair. Across the Atlantic, in a quiet suburban home in Ohio, a woman named Lena Thompson was woken by the persistent buzzing of her phone. Annoyed, she reached for it, expecting a spam call. Instead, she saw a flood of notifications, dozens of people tagging her in an Instagram post. Her heart, a muscle long conditioned to brace for pain, gave a sickening lurch. With trembling fingers, she opened the link, and there she was. A young woman, vibrant and alive, smiling under a London sun. But it was the face that made Lena drop the phone. It was Lily's face. Older, matured, but unmistakably hers. The eyes, the mouth, the way her hair caught the light. It was the face she had pictured in her dreams every night for 15 years. The face she had imagined aging year by year. Tears streamed down her face, hot and unstoppable. "David," she whispered, her voice choked with a mixture of terror and hope so fierce it burned. "David, wake up. I think someone found our Lily." Back in London, Palara knew nothing of the storm brewing online. Her world was still perfect, a bubble of sightseeing and shared meals with her father. They were staying in a chic Airbnb in South Kensington, a pristine white flat with minimalist furniture and large windows overlooking a leafy square. That evening, Richard seemed off. He was quieter than usual, his phone buzzing incessantly on the table beside him. He would glance at it, his jaw tightening, before quickly silencing it and shoving it back in his pocket. "Everything okay, Dad?" Alara asked, noticing the flicker of anxiety in his eyes. He forced a smile, but it didn't reach them. "Just work," he said, a little too quickly. "A project manager is having a meltdown." Nothing to worry about, but Alara felt a prickle of unease. Her father was her rock, the calmest person she knew. This agitation was foreign, unsettling. Later that night, she was scrolling through her own social media, about to post a picture of herself at the Tower of London, when a message popped up from a friend back home. "Oh my God, Alara, is this you? You're going viral." Attached was a link to Anya's Instagram post. Alara clicked it. Her curiosity piqued. The photo loaded, and she smiled, remembering the bright, beautiful morning. Then she read the caption and scrolled down to the comments. Her smile vanished. Her blood ran cold. She saw her face next to the face of a missing child, Lily Mae Thompson. She zoomed in on the flyer in the background, her heart pounding a frantic, terrifying rhythm against her ribs. The resemblance was absolute. It wasn't just similar. It was identical. The same wide-set hazel eyes, the same small, upturned nose, the same distinctively shaped lips. She felt a wave of vertigo, as if the floor had dropped away beneath her. It was like looking at a photograph of herself as a toddler, a photograph she had never seen before. "Dad?" she called out, her voice trembling. Richard came into the room, a towel around his neck. He saw the phone in her hand, the image on the screen, and the color drained from his face. For a single terrifying second, she saw pure, unadulterated panic in his eyes before he masked it. "Oh, that," he said, his voice strained as he attempted a casual laugh. "Crazy, isn't it? The internet is a weird place. Just some stupid coincidence, sweetie. People have doppelgangers. Don't let it bother you." He reached for her phone, trying to take it, but Alara pulled it back. "A coincidence?" she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "Dad, she looks exactly like me." Richard's expression hardened. "Alara, drop it. It's nothing. Some photographer is just trying to get famous by making up a story. We're on vacation. Let's not ruin it with this nonsense." His tone was sharp, dismissive, a tone he had never used with her before. It wasn't reassuring. It was alarming. It was the sound of a door being slammed shut. And in that moment, Alara knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that her father was lying. The first crack had appeared in the foundation of her life, and she could feel everything she had ever believed in starting to crumble. In a quiet corner of Scotland Yard, Detective Inspector Alistair Graves nursed a lukewarm cup of tea, the dregs swirling at the bottom like his own thoughts. He was a man who preferred paper to pixels, a creature of habit in a world of relentless updates. His desk was an anomaly of neatly stacked files and handwritten notes. He wasn't on social media, but his younger, more connected Detective Sergeant Chloe was. "You need to see this, sir," she said, holding her phone out to him. "It's blowing up," Graves sighed, annoyed at the intrusion, but he took the phone. He saw the picture of the smiling girl, the bridge, the flyer. He'd seen 1,000 such things, digital noise that usually amounted to nothing. But then his eyes fixed on the name on the flyer, Lily Mae Thompson. A cold, familiar weight settled in his stomach. He didn't need to look up the file. He remembered it. It was one of his first cases as a junior detective, a file that had haunted him for years. A ghost in his personal filing cabinet of failures. He remembered the parents, their faces etched with a grief so raw it was almost unbearable to witness. He remembered the dead ends, the false leads, the crushing silence that followed the initial media frenzy. The case had gone cold, but it had never left him. He looked back at the girl in the photo. The age was right. She'd be 18 now. The face. It was older, but the architecture was the same. The bone structure, the eyes. He'd looked at Lily's toddler photo so many times he had it memorized. "It's a strong resemblance, sir," Chloe said, her voice soft. Graves handed the phone back, his expression unreadable. "Resemblances aren't evidence, Sergeant. They're just shadows. Could be anyone." But his words lacked conviction. He felt that old, familiar pull, the instinct of a hunter catching a scent on the wind after a long, cold winter. The official channels would be slow, clogged with bureaucracy. His superior, Detective Chief Inspector Wallace, was a man who trusted data, not gut feelings. He would dismiss this as internet hysteria. Graves knew he had to tread carefully. He couldn't launch a full-blown investigation based on a viral photo. But he could start asking quiet questions. He could start pulling on the loose threads. "Find out who posted the picture," he said to Chloe, his voice low. "And find out everything you can about the original Thompson case. I want the entire file on my desk, the physical copy, and see if we can identify the girl in the photograph." Discreetly. Meanwhile, the Airbnb in South Kensington had become a pressure cooker. The idyllic vacation had curdled into a tense, silent standoff. Alara stayed in her room, endlessly scrolling, reading every comment, every theory, every article about the disappearance of Lily Mae Thompson. The girl had vanished from Regent's Park during a family picnic. One moment she was there, chasing a bright red ball. The next she was gone. No witnesses, no ransom note, nothing. Just a void where a child used to be. The story resonated with a deep, unsettling familiarity Alara couldn't explain. She tried to access her own early memories, to conjure images of herself as a toddler. But there was nothing. Her memory began at around age 4, a hazy collection of images from their home in Ohio. Before that, it was a blank slate. She'd always assumed that was normal. Now it felt like a locked room in her own mind. She walked into the living room, where Richard was on the phone, his back to her. His voice was low and urgent. "No, Claire, it's not under control. I don't know what to do. We have to stick to the story, the adoption. It's all we have." Alara froze. Claire, her mother. Why was he talking to her like that? And what did he mean? Stick to the story? She backed away silently, her heart hammering. The adoption. Her parents had always told her she was their biological child. They had pictures of her mother, pregnant and glowing. They had a birth story they'd told 100 times, about a long labor and the first time her father held her. Were all of those lies? The world, which had tilted the night before, was now in a full, nauseating spin. She went to her suitcase and pulled out her laptop, her hands shaking. She logged into the family's cloud storage, a shared digital album filled with years of memories. She scrolled back through birthdays, holidays, and school plays. 2023, 2022, 2015, 2010. She kept going, her breath held tight in her chest. The photos became less frequent, the quality grainier. She reached 2008, when she would have been 2. There were a few pictures of her in a high care, a small, blurry figure. Then she hit 2007, and then nothing. The album stopped. There were no pictures of her as a baby, no pictures from the hospital, no pictures of a pregnant Claire. The timeline of her life, the one she had always accepted as gospel, had a 2-year hole in it, a black void right where her life was supposed to have begun. The birth story, the glowing mother, the first time her father held her, it was all a fabrication. The foundation of her life wasn't just cracked. It was a lie. And the man in the other room, the man she had loved and trusted more than anyone in the world, was the architect of that lie. The next morning, the tension was a physical presence in the flat, thick, and suffocating. Richard tried to act normal, suggesting they visit the British Museum. "We can see the Rosetta Stone," he said, his voice unnaturally bright. "You've always wanted to see it." Alara just stared at him, her eyes searching his for a glimmer of the father she knew, but he wouldn't meet her gaze. "I want to talk about the adoption," she said, her voice flat. Richard's forced smile collapsed. "Alara, we've been over this. It's not an adoption." That was a figure of speech. "I was talking to your mother about adopting a dog." The lie was so clumsy, so insulting, it was almost laughable. It was the lie of a desperate man, cornered and flailing. "A dog?" Alara repeated, her voice dripping with disbelief. "You were talking in hushed, panicked tones about sticking to the story because of a dog? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Look, this is complicated. Your mother and I, we had trouble conceiving. We used a surrogate. It was a private arrangement, very hush-hush. We never told you because we didn't want you to feel different. We wanted you to be ours, completely. That's all. This Lily thing is just a horrible coincidence that's dredged it all up. It was a better lie. More detailed, more plausible. It explained the lack of pregnancy photos, the secrecy. For a heart-stopping moment, Alara wanted to believe him. The relief of it would be like a cool drink of water after days in the desert. She could accept this story, and they could go back to being a happy family on vacation. But her gut, a newly awakened and insistent voice, screamed that this was just another layer of deception. A more sophisticated cage. While they were locked in this silent battle of wills, a new player entered the scene. Lena Thompson, fueled by a hope that bordered on madness, had taken the first flight to London. She couldn't wait for the police. She had to do something. She printed hundreds of new flyers, using a screenshot of the girl from Anya's photo, cropping it and placing it beside Lily's toddler picture. The caption read, "Are you Lily? Missing for 15 years. Your family is looking for you. We love you." She went straight to South Kensington, a place the online sleuths had pinpointed as a likely area for wealthy American tourists. She began to methodically tape her flyers to every lamppost, every bus stop, every waste bin. A one-woman army on a desperate mission. From the window of the Airbnb, Alara saw her. A woman with tired, determined eyes and hair, the same shade of brown as her own, moving with a purpose that was both frantic and resolute. She was taping a flyer to a lamppost directly across the square. Ilara's breath hitched. She could see the woman's face clearly, a face she recognized from the old news articles. It was Lena Thompson, Lily's mother. At that exact moment, Lena looked up, her gaze sweeping across the windows of the townhouses. For a fraction of a second, her eyes met Ilara's. There was no sign of recognition in Lena's eyes, just a deep, bottomless well of grief and longing. But for Ilara, the connection was electric, a jolt of something primal and profound. It was a feeling of being seen, not as Ilara, the American tourist, but as someone else, someone lost and yearned for. The moment was broken by Richard's sharp intake of breath behind her. He had seen Lena too. "We're leaving," he said, his voice tight with panic. "Pack your things. We're going to the airport. Now." But Ilara didn't move. Her feet felt rooted to the floor. Leaving now would be an admission of guilt. Staying felt like an act of defiance, the first step toward a terrifying unknown truth. Unseen by them both, across the square, a man sat in an unmarked sedan, watching the entire scene unfold through a pair of binoculars. D. Graves lowered them, a grin set to his mouth. The hunt was no longer quiet. The ghost had just walked onto the stage. The air in the flat crackled with the unspoken. Richard was frantic, throwing clothes into a suitcase with a desperate, clumsy energy. "The flight is in 3 hours," he said, not looking at Ilara. "We can make it if we leave now. We'll go to Paris. Forget London. This place is cursed." He was a man running from a fire, trying to drag her with him. But Ilara stood perfectly still, a small island of calm in his storm of panic. The sight of Lena, the raw, aching hope in that woman's eyes, had solidified something within her. A desire to believe her father was rapidly being eclipsed by the need to know the truth, no matter how devastating. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of an unshakable decision. Richard stopped packing and turned to face her. The mask of the loving father was gone, replaced by the face of a cornered stranger. "Don't be ridiculous, Ilara. You're being hysterical. This has gotten out of hand. These people are crazy. That woman out there is a stalker. They're harassing us. We need to leave for our own safety. Is she a stalker, or is she my mother? Elara asked, the words hanging in the air between them, sharp and glittering as shards of glass. The question struck him like a physical blow. He flinched, his face crumbling for a moment before he rebuilt his walls. I am your father, he said, his voice low and dangerous, and Claire is your mother. That is the only truth that matters. We raised you. We love you. That woman out there is a fantasy, a ghost story the internet cooked up. Now, are you coming with me? Or am I going to have to make you? The threat, veiled but unmistakable, sent a chill down her spine. This was not her father. This was a man terrified of losing control. It was in that moment that she made her choice. While Richard was in his bedroom, frantically calling the airline, Elara grabbed her jacket and her phone. She looked around the pristine flat that had, in the space of 48 hours, transformed from a holiday dream into a gilded cage. She slipped out the door, her heart pounding, and ran down the stairs, not looking back. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away from him. As she emerged onto the street, blinking in the afternoon sun, a black car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down, and a man with kind, weary eyes looked out at her. Elara, he said, his voice calm and steady. My name is Detective Inspector Graves. I think it's time we had a chat. Relief washed over her, so potent it almost buckled her knees. She wasn't alone anymore. She got into the car, and as it pulled away from the curb, she saw Richard appear at the window of the flat, his face a mask of fury and despair. Across the square, Lena Thompson was still taping up her flyers, a lonely sentinel of hope, unaware that the girl she was searching for was just yards away, finally moving towards the truth. D. Graves took Elara to a quiet, neutral location, a small, anonymous police office far from the bustle of Scotland Yard. He bought her a cup of tea, the steam warming her cold hands. He didn't interrogate her. He just let her talk. And the story poured out of her: the photo, the missing baby pictures, the overheard phone call, the clumsy lies about surrogacy, the sudden, desperate attempt to flee. Graves listened patiently, his expression giving nothing away, but his mind was racing, connecting the dots. He mentioned a story, Elara said, her voice hoarse. He told my Mo. He told Claire they had to stick to the story. The adoption. Graves nodded slowly. In the original investigation, he said, his voice gentle but firm, we explored the possibility of an illegal adoption ring. People who prey on desperate couples. It was a dead end then, but perhaps it's time to look again. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Elara, we can find out for sure. We can get you the truth. But it requires a voluntary DNA sample. It's your choice. No one can force you. This was the precipice, the point of no return. Providing a sample was an act of betrayal against the only family she had ever known. It was an admission that their love might have been built on a crime. But not providing it meant living forever in the suffocating fog of the unknown. She looked at the detective's steady, honest eyes. I'll do it, she said, her voice clear and strong. I need to know. As the arrangements were being made, a team was dispatched to the South Kensington flat. But Richard was gone. The apartment was empty, his suitcase and passport missing. He had bolted. This act, more than any lie he had told, was a confession. The DNA test was a simple cheek swab, an anticlimactic procedure for such a life-altering event. The results would take 24 to 48 hours. An eternity. For Elara, the waiting was a strange kind of purgatory. Graves had placed her in protective custody in a modest hotel, with a female officer stationed outside her door. She was safe, but she had never felt more adrift. Her entire identity was suspended, hanging on the outcome of a laboratory test. Who was she? Was she Elara, The daughter of Richard and Claire? A girl from Ohio whose life was a comfortable, well-told story? Or was she Lily, the daughter of Lena and David, a ghost from London with a past that was a terrifying blank? She spent the hours staring out the window, watching the city lights blur through her unshed tears. She thought of Claire, the woman she called Mom. She remembered scraped knees and bedtime stories, warm hugs and gentle advice. How could that love be a lie? How could a person be so kind, so genuinely maternal, while harboring such a monstrous secret? The love had felt real. It still felt real. And that was the most confusing part of it all. Can a crime be born from love? Can a lie be told with a true heart? Meanwhile, Dee Graves was not idle. With Richard on the run and Alara cooperating, DCI Wallace had finally, reluctantly, sanctioned a full-scale investigation. Richard's face was now flagged at every airport and port in the UK and Europe. Graves's team began a deep dive into Richard and Claire's past. They were a seemingly normal couple. He was a successful architect. She was a retired primary school teacher. They had no criminal records. But as the investigators dug deeper, they found the cracks. 15 years ago, around the time of Lily's disappearance, Claire had taken an extended leave of absence from her teaching job, citing personal health reasons. They had sold their house and moved suddenly from a small town in Pennsylvania to Ohio. They had paid for the new house in cash. It was a pattern of uprooting, of erasing a past. Then they found the crucial link. Claire had a sister, Helen, a neonatal nurse, who 15 years ago worked at the very same London hospital where Lily Mae Thompson had been born. And hospital records showed that Helen had accessed Lilia's files several times in the days leading up to her disappearance. With no medical reason to do so, the shadow figure had a name. The conspiracy was no longer just about Richard and Claire. It was a family affair, a desperate criminal pact born from one sister's grief and another's misplaced loyalty. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture more tragic and complex than anyone had imagined. The clock was ticking, not just on the DNA results, but on finding Richard before he vanished for good. The call came 26 hours after the swab. Graves met Alara in her hotel room, his face somber. He didn't need to say a word. She knew. "It's a match, isn't it?" She whispered. He nodded. A 99.99% match to the DNA provided by Lena and David Thompson 15 years ago. "Your name is Lily." The words landed, and the world finally, irrevocably, settled into its new, terrifying alignment. Alara from Ohio was gone. Lily from London was here, a stranger in her own skin. The grief was immediate and overwhelming, a tidal wave of loss for the parents she had loved, for the life that was now a crime scene. But beneath the grief, there was also a sliver of something else. Relief. The ground, however painful, was solid. The fog had lifted. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice small. "Now," Graves said gently, "we have to tell your parents. Lena and David, they've been waiting for this call for 15 years. He paused. "And we just found Richard. He was trying to board a ferry to France at Dover. He's being brought back to London." Everything was converging. The past and the present were about to collide. The reunion was arranged in a quiet room at the police station, a sterile space that felt wholly inadequate for the magnitude of the moment. Lena and David Thompson walked in, their faces a mixture of raw hope and sheer terror. They looked older than in the news photos, worn down by a grief that had been their constant companion for a decade and a half. Alara Lily stood by the window, her back to the door, unable to turn and face them. She could hear their soft footsteps, their ragged breaths. "Lily?" Lena's voice was a fragile whisper, a sound that seemed to hold 15 years of tears. Lily squeezed her eyes shut, her heart a frantic bird in her chest. She had imagined this moment, dreaded it, yearned for it. These were her parents. her real parents, but they were strangers. David spoke next, his voice thick with emotion. "We never gave up on you, sweetheart. Not for one day." Slowly, she turned around. She looked at them, truly looked at them for the first time. She saw her own eyes in her mother's face. She saw the shape of her jaw in her father's. It was like looking into a living mirror, seeing the map of where she came from. Lena took a hesitant step forward, her hand outstretched but not touching, as if Lily were a mirage she feared would vanish. "Can I?" She started, her voice breaking. Lily didn't know what to do. The muscle memory of her life was to run to Claire for comfort. But Claire was a kidnapper. This woman, this stranger, was her mother. In a gesture that felt both alien and deeply instinctual, Lily took a step forward and walked into Lena's arms. The embrace was tentative at first, and it tightened, a desperate anchoring hold. 15 years of separation, of unspoken love and unimaginable pain, collapsed into a single sittering moment. David joined the embrace, his large hands resting on her hair, and for the first time in days, Lily wept. They were not tears of sadness or joy, but of a profound, shattering release. While a family was being pieced back together in one room, another was being broken apart in another. D.I. Graves sat across from Richard in a stark interrogation room. Richard was a different man from the confident father on holiday. He was haggard, defeated, the fight gone out of him. "It was all me," he said, his voice a monotone recital. "I took her. Claire knew nothing about it. I found her wandering alone in the park. I don't know what came over me. I took her. I brought her home and told Claire I'd found an abandoned baby, and we had to keep her. She believed me. She is innocent." It was a classic, self-sacrificing confession, designed to protect the one he loved. But Graves had seen it 100 times, and it didn't fit the facts. "So it's just a coincidence that your sister-in-law, Helen, a nurse at the hospital where Lily was born, was illegally accessing her medical files?" Graves asked calmly. Richard's head snapped up, his eyes widening in shock. He hadn't known they'd made that connection. "And it's a coincidence that you and Claire, a couple who had been through years of devastatingly unsuccessful fertility treatments, suddenly came into possession of a healthy baby girl just days after Claire's sister had access to her." The carefully constructed dam of Richard's confession began to crack. "Claire was destroyed," he whispered, his voice breaking. "After the last miscarriage? She wasn't coming back from it. She was a ghost. Helen saw what it was doing to her. She saw this baby, Lily. Her birth mother was a young girl who was going to give her up for adoption anyway. It was a flawed plan. A terrible, horrible plan, but it came from a place of love. Helen just switched the paperwork, made it look like Lily had been discharged to a foster agency that didn't exist. She brought her to us. We were saving her, we thought, giving her a better life with a mother who would have died for her." "You didn't save her, Richard," Graves said, his voice cold as steel. "You stole her. You stole her from Lena and David Thompson, who have spent every day of the last 15 years in a living hell. You stole her name, her history, her family. You built your happiness on the foundations of their misery." Richard finally broke, his face collapsing into his hands as sobs racked his body. The confession was no longer about protecting Claire. It was about the crushing weight of his own guilt. Later that day, Lily sat across from him, a glass partition between them. She needed to see him one last time. She needed to ask him the one question that still haunted her. "Why?" she asked, her voice steady. "Why didn't you just adopt legally?" Richard looked up, his eyes red and swollen. "We tried," he said, his voice raw. "For years, we were turned down. An old health issue of Claire's. We were deemed unsuitable. And Claire, she wanted a baby more than she wanted to breathe. It was a madness, a love that became a sickness. I would have done anything to see her smile again. Even this. He looked at Lily, his gaze filled with a genuine, heartbreaking love. I know it means nothing now, he said. But we loved you, Ilara, every single second. That part was real. Lily just nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. She believed him. And that, somehow, was the cruelest part of all. The legal proceedings were swift. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Richard, Claire, and her sister Helen all confessed. Their story, one of desperate love twisted into a criminal act, garnered a strange mix of public condemnation and reluctant sympathy. They weren't monsters in the traditional sense. They were broken people who had committed a monstrous act. They were sentenced to prison, their love story ending in the cold finality of a courtroom. For Lily, the weeks that followed were a disorienting blur of new experiences. She moved into Lena and David's home, a beautiful house in the English countryside that should have been her own. They were kind, patient, and loving, but they were still strangers. She was learning them, and they were learning her. They showed her childhood bedroom, untouched for 15 years, a perfect time capsule of a life interrupted. There was a small rocking horse, a shelf of picture books, and a faded drawing of a red ball taped to the wall. It was the room of a ghost, and she was now being asked to inhabit it. She had to navigate the treacherous terrain of a dual identity. In her heart, she was still Ilara. She missed the man and woman who had raised her, a feeling that brought with it a heavy, confusing guilt. How could she mourn the loss of her own kidnappers? But the love had been real, the memories were hers, and the grief was undeniable. At the same time, she was Lily. She was the daughter of Lena and David, a girl with a past she couldn't remember and a future she hadn't chosen. She found herself studying their mannerisms, listening to their stories, trying to find pieces of herself in them. She discovered she had her father's dry sense of humor and her mother's love for gardening. Slowly, painstakingly, she began to stitch the two halves of her life together, not as Ilara or Lily, but as someone new, someone forged in the crucible of this impossible truth. One afternoon, she found Lena in the garden, quietly weeping. "I'm sorry," Lena said, wiping her eyes. "It's just... sometimes I look at you, and all I can see are the years we lost. The first day of school, the scraped knees, the birthdays. They took that from us." Lily sat beside her on the small wooden bench. "They did," she said softly. "But they also gave me things. They taught me how to read. They took me to my first concert. They loved me." She took her mother's hand. "It's all part of my story now. The good and the bad, the truth and the lie. I can't erase 18 years. But we can start making new memories right here." Lena looked at her daughter, this incredible, resilient young woman who had survived the unthinkable, and she smiled through her tears. "Yes," she said, "we can." The photograph that started it all now sat in a simple frame on Lily's new desk. Anya, the photographer, had sent her a print with a handwritten note on the back. "I'm so sorry for the chaos I brought into your life, but I am so glad you found your way home." Lily looked at the image often. The smiling girl on the bridge, so blissfully unaware of the fault line running beneath her feet. She was a stranger now, a girl from another lifetime. But she was also a part of her. She was the foundation upon which Lily was now building her new life. The journey was far from over. There would be therapy, difficult conversations, and moments of profound grief for all that had been lost. But there was also hope. There was the quiet joy of discovering a shared memory with her parents, the comfort of a family's unconditional love, the freedom of finally knowing who she was and where she came from. The lie had been built to protect a fragile kind of love, but the truth, as painful as it was, had set her free. It had allowed a different, deeper love to finally find its way home. So, what is the moral of this story? It's a complicated one. It's a story that shows us that love, in its most desperate form, can lead people to do terrible things. It proves that a family is more than just blood, but that the truth of that blood still matters. But I think the most important lesson is about the quiet power of paying attention. A photographer, a stranger, took a picture and chose to look closer. She saw something that didn't add up, and she had the courage to ask a question. Her curiosity, her single act of sharing that photo, was the key that unlocked a 15-year-old prison of lies. It reminds us that truth often hides in plain sight, in the background of a photograph, in the flicker of an eye, in a story that doesn't quite ring true. It's a reminder that we all have a responsibility to look closer, to question what we see, and to speak up for those who cannot. The world is full of lost stories and missing pieces. Sometimes all it takes is one person with a camera, or one person willing to listen, to start putting them back together. Thank you for listening. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that make you think, and more importantly, make you feel.